Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join. Do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers. So you can see the numbers going up. Just going to leave it a few moments for more people to arrive and then we'll get started. Hi Athena, hi. Can see you said hello in the Q&A box. Okay, can see a lot more of you have joined now, so we're going to officially start the webinar. So hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is the Higher Education and Public Sector Update, how to promote digital accessibility at your institution. And this time we're joined by the University of Derby. My name is Annie Mannion and I'm Digital Communications Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through what you can expect from today's session. So if you can just go on to the next slide, please, Adam. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, we have live captions on the webinar and they're provided by MyClearText. And so thank you, Katie, who's providing those in the background. You can turn on the captions using the closed caption option on the control panel. And additional captions are also available at streamtext.net/player?= event equals AbilityNet, sorry. Slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet and also on our website at abilitynet.org.uk/Derby/webinar. If you have any technical issues and you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email with a recording, the transcript and the slides, and that will be on Thursday afternoon. And depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. So if you want to ask the speakers any questions, do drop those in the Q&A area and we'll address those later on or after today's session in a follow-up blog, which will be on our website. We also have a feedback page that you'll be directed to at the end, which invites you to tell us about any future topics that you'd like us to cover in our webinars. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with AbilityNet, we support people of any age living with any disability or impairment to use technology to achieve their goals at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing specialist advice, services, free information resources like this webinar, and I'll share a little more about our services at the end of the webinar. So today we're joined by Claire Gardner, who is Senior Learning Technologist and Lead Contact for Digital Accessibility at the University of Derby. And also joining us are Alice Taylor, who's Senior Accessibility Consultant at AbilityNet, and Amy Lowe, who's Service Delivery Director at AbilityNet. And they're going to be providing an update on the public sector bodies' accessibility regulations, and we'll be sharing some information about mobile apps specifically. So just before Alice and Amy kick off today's webinar content, I'm just going to start with a poll. So I'm just going to launch the poll now. One moment. Okay, so can you tell us, how is your institution equipping the broader team with the skills and knowledge to ensure they're working in an accessible way? Is it via live training sessions, guidance documents, e-learning resources, accessible templates, or a combination of the above? Or finally, nothing formalised has been provided. So depending on how you've joined the webinar, you may find you can't see the poll, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. So I'm just going to leave it a few more moments for anyone who wants to vote. Just over half of you have voted now. Okay, just give it a few more moments and then I'll end the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and then share the results. So I can see that we have the largest set of results. We've got 36% say a combination of the above. Just behind that is guidance documents at 35%. Then we've got e-learning resources at 25%, Nothing formalised has been provided at 24%, and then live training sessions at 20%. So we'll have a few, we've got some training options specific to HE and FE that we'll share with you later on. But before that, over to you, Alice and Amy.
Thanks, Annie. Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well and experiencing some of the lovely sunshine that I've got in Oxfordshire today. So next slide. So yes, it's kind of a Mark II on mobile apps today. Just a quick recap that the mobile apps deadline, which is coming up in June. So for anyone who has developed any mobile apps in-house that you're using, do make sure they're checked for accessibility and updated with an accessibility statement in good time for the 23rd. Typically with universities and public sector bodies that we're talking to, quite a lot of third-party mobile apps are in use of some sort or another. And so if you haven't already, do gather the details together of all of these apps that might be in use at this moment in time. Speak to suppliers to get their accessibility statement info and publish a statement. And if the information that they provide to you isn't adequate to be able to create a statement, whilst putting a bit of pressure on them to try and come up with some information, we would highly recommend that you do some testing yourselves in the meantime to tease out any issues. So we talked briefly on the mobile apps requirements last webinar, and there were quite a few questions arising around testing techniques, what constitutes a mobile app and other such things. So today we've got our lovely Alice Taylor, Senior Accessibility Consultant at AbilityNet, to help discuss some of these. Hi Alice, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, I've got a few questions for you. Yep. So my first one, and this is something that tends to bamboozle me a bit. Can you explain the difference between web apps, mobile web apps, desktop apps, native mobile apps? Can you try and make some sense of that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, really good point. There are many different types of products which are referred to as an app, but the kind of differences between them are kind of how they're built. So mobile and desktop apps are generally referred to as web apps, and these are built with the traditional web techniques such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These will generally respond to screen size, so you might see it on desktop and then see it on your mobile, and it would have a different layout. Then you have native apps, which these are built for a platform, so think iOS and Android, and they're built with technologies such as Swift. These crucially are different platforms, so you might have an app that is on both of these platforms, so it can be accessed on iOS and Android. And they may look the same, but they are different, so they may have been built completely differently. So from a testing perspective, you would want to look at both of them. Native apps can be downloaded from the App Store, while if you have a web app, this is something that can be accessed on the internet in your browser.
Got you, okay. And so on the native mobile apps, some of the content is then available whether you're online or offline, whereas web apps will need an internet connection as well.
Yes, yeah. So a native app, you would, as it's downloaded onto your device, some of that content would be available offline.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That makes it a lot clearer for me. So I hope that's been helpful to others. So going on to my next question on the next slide, can you tell us, when it comes to the web content accessibility guidelines, is there different guidance for testing and success criteria when it comes to mobile apps?
Yeah, so I think this was mentioned on previous webinars as well. The WCAG guidelines and success criteria do extend to mobile apps as well. There are certain criteria which specifically relates to mobile apps. So when 2.1 was introduced, there was quite a lot of additions which related specifically to mobile use. Some of these are, there's one criteria called orientation, which relates to ensuring that your website or app can be accessed in both landscape and portrait mode. Then there's others such as pointer gestures. So when you're on a mobile, there's gestures such as swiping or pinch zoom. But if you're using a gesture like this, then you'd also want to ensure that there's a button alternative so that your user can access it either by swiping or by pressing buttons. And there's other ones such as pointer cancellation. So this is ensuring that something's not triggered on the down event. So imagine if you saw a link on your mobile and you went and moved your finger over the link, you wouldn't want that to then activate the link just because you'd moved over it. You'd want to make sure that you could still cancel that event if you didn't want to go onto it. So there are a number of success criteria that are good to be aware of for mobile.
Brilliant, thank you. So you obviously in your day-to-day work would do quite a bit of testing on mobile apps. Can you tell us what the main testing techniques are for mobile?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of them are very similar to how you test on desktop. So if you think about color contrast and non-text contrast, these are things that can be tested in the design stages as well. Then there's text resizing. So this one you could do at the operating system level. So you can change the text sizing within your iPhone, for example, or any other mobile device. But one of the main tools to use is a screen reader, and on mobile there are free built-in ones. This is different for both iOS and Android. And this can help identify some of the key problems. So there are kind of two different ways that you'd navigate with a screen reader on a mobile. So you can either swipe through all the elements on the page and in a sequence, and then you can double tap anywhere on the screen to select an item. Or what you can do is you can do what's known as navigating by touch, where you can drag your finger over the screen and the screen reader will then announce the element that's underneath your finger. But similar to desktop, you can also navigate by a specific element, such as a heading, for example. So you can swipe through just the headings instead of swiping through all the options on the page. But if you've never used it before, both VoiceOver and TalkBack do have tutorials that you can follow. And I'd really recommend going through these to kind of give you an idea of what they can do. But things to think about are, do all the elements receive focus as you're swiping through them? Are the headings identified as headings? Are all the elements available when you're swiping through? And as I mentioned before, Android and iOS are also different platforms, so it is important to test on both of them.
Oh, that's really helpful, thank you. And I think probably some of the audience are scribbling away at those there. And those tutorials then, do you find them just in the settings or something like that? Whereabouts?
Yeah, so I think when on iOS, for example, you can turn on VoiceOver, and when you do it, I think there's an option underneath it saying something along the lines of practice VoiceOver. And then this will then help you. It's like an environment where you can kind of learn how to do it. And I think TalkBack's got something similar as well.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you. And so my last question, in terms of the sort of commonly found issues, what are the usual suspects that people can expect to kind of crop up when they're doing mobile testing? What do you find, and is it similar to web or different?
Yeah, so some things are similar to web. So headings, for example, it's really important to make sure your headings are marked up. Elements anything that is a button, you want to make sure is announced as a button, so a user knows that they can activate it. But one of the most common things we see on apps is the focus as well. So when you activate an element, let's say like if you had a modal pop-up, when you activate that, you want to make sure focus goes inside of that. And then when you close it, you want to make sure focus goes back to the original element. But this is something that in apps, it can be sometimes quite difficult to kind of send that focus. So we do see focus issues crop up in apps.
Okay, so that's one to look out for. And I can imagine the headings is really important on mobile because it's sort of a long scrolling, you know,
Yeah.
people do not want to have to be going through every single piece of information on the screen. Oh, that's been so helpful. Thank you, Alice. And, you know, if anyone's got any questions, they can pop them in the Q&A and we will pick up those questions at the end. But it's been really helpful to have you there to sort of go through those ones.
No problem. I hope it was helpful.
Really, really interesting. And I'm going to get on those tutorials myself, I think, to learn the ropes. So I'm delighted now to introduce Claire Gardner from the University of Derby. As Annie said earlier, Claire is a Senior Learning Technologist at Derby and also the lead contact who's been sort of driving the whole digital accessibility agenda there. Welcome, Claire, and thanks so much for coming along to tell us about your accessibility journey.
Hi and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Amy. Just to give you a little bit more depth about what I've been doing. So I'm a career learning technologist. So I've been doing this for a significant number of years now. I was reflecting the other day about, I think, one of my first accessibility events was when I started out as a learning materials developer. Gosh, nearly 20 years ago now. I remember going very excitedly on an event up in New York for some to learn about the accessibility of learning materials. So it's been a long journey. I've been at the University of Derby actually 6 years today. It's my work anniversary. And I have responsibility for our digital learning systems at the university. So that includes our virtual learning environment, Blackboard, our e-assessment systems, e-portfolios, and so on. So that takes up my day-to-day work. I must admit, I was a little nervous about being described as the lead contact for digital accessibility. I sort of switched into a bit of imposter syndrome and got a bit worried. And then I thought about it and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to own it. And my presentation is a story, actually, as I was writing it. It's about the work that we've been undertaking and I've been leading on over the past few years. And essentially, my digital accessibility experience took a real significant direction when I was actually asked to implement a tool. So hopefully you'll enjoy the bit of the narrative that I've put around this presentation today. So next slide, please. Thank you, Adam. So a bit of background. Inclusive practice and accessibility has been embedded in our strategies at the University of Derby for some time now. So it's across all our strategies for excellence. So that relates to our learning and teaching strategy, our assessment and feedback, and our technology enhanced learning strategy. Our learning and technology strategy was actually award-winning a few years ago from the Times Higher Awards, and it promotes inclusive and flexible learning provision which meets the needs of the diverse learners and our different learners and provides an environment in which learners are effectively supported in their transition throughout the stages of their higher education journey. Our assessment and feedback strategy has a core theme about inclusive and authentic assessment. And a key aim is to develop, fully inclusive approaches to assessment and feedback, and that includes about choice and mode. And then we also have our technology enhanced learning strategy, which looks at, as part of that, about benchmarking digital practice, and that includes on inclusive elements and investing in the research in that digital experience throughout. Our current ambition at the moment is we're working on a new strategy, and it's about merging them all into a comprehensive suite. The other really interesting background for where some of our journeys sort of started out was that shift, and it actually was 2015-16, so it's been incredible to look back at some of this, was we set up a project called Inclusive Derby, and primarily it was initially set up as a response to the changes in the disabled students allowance some time ago, but we quickly realised that just focusing on that was quite short-sighted. So we took that quite broader approach and came up with this group to look at improving inclusive practice across the university. And that brought together a range of stakeholders from across the university. That included our team, learning and teaching, student wellbeing, student experience, all our academic staff, quality and diversity, the student union and IT. And it came up with some findings at the start. So that was again about providing lecture notes in advance of the session and as appropriate. It focused on, we've used Panopto as our lecture recording system. So we were promoting it to use to capture those appropriate teaching sessions, you know, mainly those that are didactic and where you expect the students to take the notes. Our third outcome was around, recommendation was around good practice when creating documents to ensure they're accessible, and whether that was presentations, video and audio. And then it was also highlighting the routes for feedback. So talking to student wellbeing about concerns regarding individual students. And we had quite a lot of outputs to that project, where we reports into exec, a SharePoint site, and sharing all the guides and feedback. Alongside that, and underpinning our technology enhanced learning strategy, the university introduced digital practice programme baselines in 2018. And that was as a framework to benchmark practice and to support enhancements to the student digital learning experience. And we based it, it was like a rubric. So it was based on, like I've said, Blackboard's our VLE. So we based it on the Blackboard Exemplary Course rubric, the UK National Union of Students Digital Experience. And we also sort of linked it to some of those NSS and TEF outcomes at the time. And it looked across several areas around digital course material and of course inclusive practice, assessment and feedback and so on. It was a self-assessment exercise where staff were expected to undertake that and review it in accordance with their programme. It was quite successful, and the baseline process achieved sector recognition in 2018, and it won a Blackboard Catalyst Award for teaching and learning. But I think what was really evident as we had staff going through this digital practice baseline and some of the other background of the strategies that we've got, that we actually were very poor on tools to support this practice. We knew that we wanted inclusive practice, and we knew we wanted to drive change to accessibility, but the staff actually didn't have the tools in which to support. So next slide, please. So this led us to the path of Blackboard Ally, and we'd seen this at conferences, and it gave us the business case to go out and look at Blackboard Ally. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Blackboard Ally is a tool that integrates into any virtual learning environment. For us, that is Blackboard, but it also works with the others out in the sector, and it also works on, you can have it for the web as well. It does three main functions. The first is that it gives, for any content that is uploaded into the platform and also on WYSIWYG content, so what you see is what you get, and that's content that's designed on the screen. Students or staff or the users of that content can request an alternative format, and that's for up to them. They get a choice, and it covers content from tagged PDFs to HTML to EPUB, to an audio version and to Braille. So it's self-service. It immediately translates that document and it's available for download onto your device. The other element of that is there is instructor-facing guidance. So it pops up, you get an indicator on your content which you can click on, and it gives a visual indicator of how accessible your content is. So for example, it works through a bit of a wizard. So for example, an image might not have an alt text, and it will talk about how you can fix it and why you might want to fix it. So it covers those two elements of guidance. And finally, Ally produces institutional reporting. So you can see reporting at a module or course level within the virtual learning environment, but also from an institutional perspective, administrators on the system can get an understanding of how the virtual environment as a whole is performing, and that's something that's quite core to my role. So I can have insight onto that data and to see the level of accessible content within the platform, and that's been really useful. So we installed it back in 2017 now, and we did some piloting on across a few modules on our test platforms. And then we went live in January 2018. So we rolled it out at Christmas time and it was live. We did it with a Blackboard upgrade and it was live when students came back in that new year. We had quite a big piece around supporting the rollout of that tool. So it involved a lot of, we ran staff training sessions. Although to be fair, it's quite an intuitive tool and we only had a couple of staff turn up. You know, when we launched it, I was expecting a little bit my phone to ring off the hook, maybe about, especially some visual indicators and going, Claire, why is it red? But we didn't get any of that, actually. It was really interesting. We did a lot around student comms, and that's an ongoing basis, as is our staff training. And then a lot of guides and resources to underpin that. We had quite a lot of that already in place. And I've shared on the screen on the slides some overview about some of the statistics and how we've performed in there. So you can see that when we went live in that January, Ally gives us a percentage score, and we saw our initial, we went out, it came out at 41%, our initial institutional score. By August, it had risen to 48%, so that was great to see that percentage change of that first few months worth of work. In 1920, our on-campus, what I mean by on-campus is that the University of Derby also has the University of Derby Online, so we have an online division at the university, so where the content is designed by teams of learning designers and online content developers. So if we managed, for purposes of using Ally, we switched it out for online and on campus. So for on campus in 1920, it was at 69%, just nearly 70%. So you can see that we did have some increase. 26% of those in the course, so our average file type makeup is around 26% is native Blackboard items, and then 17% is PDFs. And you can see that score was on around 250,000 pieces of content. In 2020-21, I took the stats for this a few days ago. On campus was tracking at 75.7%. And again, you can see that our file makeup is roughly the same. And that's on 341,000 pieces of content. So the number of content, as with COVID, that you'd expect is increasing significantly. So you can see the picture of change there that we were able to track with numbers and KPIs, which is really great to be able to evidence some of our practice. Our online actually sits very consistently to around 96.3%, and that's due to that designed and curated model that underpins that. There's quite a community of practice around Blackboard Ally. It was developed at the time back a few years ago. It was new to the market, so I'm just going to blow my own trumpet and say that with a colleague, we now co-chair the European Ally User Group, and that was a community of practice that was set up to share good practice around Blackboard Ally, but of course we look at more wider accessibility areas. And we meet monthly, and that's open for anyone to join. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So a little bit about Ally and beyond. So that was my role at that time. It was like, Claire, can you implement a tool? Well, it was a huge learning curve because implementing a tool, you know, took me on quite a significant journey about understanding that tool and the nuances. Beyond Ally, what else have we been up to at Derby? Again, as I said, like much of you on the call, we've got training and guides, and that covers everything from the broader principles of inclusive practice right the way down to how to make a tool, you know, how to find the accessibility features. And that for us focuses on our learning technology. So that covers areas around whether it's Panopto or Collaborate and Box of broadcasts. We are a Microsoft university, and we rely on and promote quite heavily around a lot of the Microsoft features, specifically the accessibility checker within Microsoft. So perhaps the one flaw of Ally, it's very much after the fact. So you only find out about the accessibility of your content once it's uploaded into the virtual learning environment. And a bit of a flaw in the feedback from the staff was, well, actually, that's a bit late for us. We need that information while we're designing those resources. So that's where we put together just a bit of a simple process around using the accessibility checker So at the point of creation, you use the Microsoft Accessibility Checker, upload your document, and then use Ally as well to back up that finding. So that was a bit of a nice little flow that we put in, and that was really key to that. As I mentioned earlier, we've got lecture capture, so that's at the core of some of our provision around recording lectures. And a year ago, I was obviously talking about Panopto and in-class recording, and now we're talking about Blackboard Collaborate and Microsoft Teams recordings. We have done quite a lot of work on virtual learning environment module templates to improve accessibility, consistency, and that inclusive practice. So those are redeveloped on an iterative process each year based on feedback from our users. There's a balance of change that we implement each year on those for that consistency. And we've also invested in tools like ReadSpeaker, also into the VLE as well. We've led on communication campaigns as well. So we've had campaigns around accessibility and inclusive practice within our university internal communications and into our blog posts. So there we were, and that was me sort of from a technology enhanced learning perspective. I was on the road to sort of happily ever after, I think. So next slide, please. And then in my journey, I went to a Blackboard conference, I think it was, and heard Robert McLaren from Policy Connect, who came to speak and tell us all about the public sector body's regulations. And I think that must have been in 2017 when we heard that. So that was a bit of a jaw-dropping fundamental moment for us to turn that around. You know, we came back from that conference and got started straight away. For us, that was a lot of awareness raising. So me to come back from the conference and to start talking and having those conversations internally about what was progressing, where there was support and resource. I quickly found out that it actually wasn't on the radar at the time. So we moved fairly quickly and started to put together awareness raising campaigns and a working group. I co-chair that working group with a colleague who from the digital marketing team. And that's been really successful in the fact that we've had a groundswell, I think, of middle management who have all actively saw the importance and worked together. We've had quite a lot of output through that working group. It's been really great to work with a good bunch of colleagues who've been really proactive in moving along the agenda. As part of that working group, we reviewed the legislation. We got our own legal counsel involved to look at our accessibility templates. IT have been crucial in helping us to gather accessibility statements from suppliers. I think they have a percentage of which we're working to. It's an ongoing process. I think we had 100 and something in place the other day when I was checking that we're all looking after those. And those have been all divvied out to those functional owners. It's now a killer question in procurement. So we're looking really closely at accessibility when we procure new software. It's a regular conversation that I have with our suppliers, so we're constantly championing them on to how their products are moving. You know, it was a great reminder at the start of this session from Alice and Amy about looking at the mobile. That's the next step for that group. We took a paper to exec, you know, to get them on board with what was happening. So that, again, that was really great. We've got templates, so we started, the output was around accessible templates, including those that are put together by the marketing team. So we work with marketing quite closely to ensure that the templates that we use for external presentations were compliant. So again, we were in a really good state and we were moving on. And then coronavirus hit last March. And again, that shifted the thinking again. So can I have the next slide, please? So just as I think we're on a level, the next thing comes along. So yeah, coronavirus. So like, again, most of you from education on the call, that put us into emergency remote teaching as how we described it at the University of Derby. And that led to a lot of the shifting the emphasis on supporting our students and staff who are working them remotely. As well as doing that, we were starting to plan for this academic year. So the university developed a new educational model for the academic year. So at the University of Derby, programmes are being delivered through a new innovative educational model. And this blended applied learning model has been designed to provide a high quality and applied learning experience. In accordance with government restrictions, that includes time on campus for our students alongside the off-campus digital learning delivery. And it's underpinned by fully accessible and robust student services and a rich and vibrant extracurricular programme of events. And again, from a teaching and learning perspective, we took again the off-campus, created a set of off-campus digital learning baselines to support our academic staff. Now, these are expectations and designed to support our blended approach and to ensure our capability to deliver that off-campus digital learning. So there was a set of 8 initially, and again, part of that was around accessible content. Last summer, we worked very hard and very quickly to create a course for all our academic staff to provide them with training and guidance on how to meet these digital learning baselines. So that was a really great opportunity to put some of that learning in for the staff. So from an accessible content perspective, we were able to talk to them about universal design for learning, about accessible content, why it was important, and the tools that are available to support them. We were fortunate that we were able to get 95% of our eligible academic staff to complete and engage in that module. It was quite a bit of work for them. It was over 5 days of 5 hours with one live synchronous session, and they had work to complete in order to pass the course. Another significant step in our story around digital accessibility is our professor, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Catherine Mitchell, has worked alongside Lord Blunkett and Lord Norton on the 6-month inquiry into the experience of disabled students in higher education. And an outcome last October was the report called Arriving at Thriving, which I'm sure you're all aware of, which then provided another catalyst for work within the university to progress forward. Can I have the next slide, please? So this brings us to our work with AbilityNet. So we decided, I've mentioned that we've got the tools in to support, and our team are doing a lot around how to use the tools to support to create accessible content. Again, we had our teaching and learning course that explained to staff from a teaching and learning perspective about inclusive practice and around, again, the tools that we've got. But we realised that where we had a gap was actually talking about it from the perspective of a user or a student with about specific disabilities. If we got questions around, got a student that had an issue with visual or hearing impairment, it was a little bit more challenging for us to flip that scenario and provide that support. So we reached out to AbilityNet, who were working with us, and we purchased their e-learning module called Accessibility and Me to underpin the work that we were doing internally. Accessibility and Me gives an introduction to digital accessibility requirements, but explores in depth at how to create accessible content for users, and that's both students and staff, with specific impairments or requirements. So for example, it will provide guidance on how to create the best content, for example, for a hearing impaired student. Part of that course is a focus on each of those sections is around the lived experience. And this has really resonated with our staff who have gone through the course. To give them an understanding on how individuals are personally affected, it is very emotive, and I think it provides a real powerful imperative to change. We piloted this course back in January, so it was new for us. So we built the materials provided by AbilityNet. We built it in our staff development learning platform, which is Desire to Learn. So we had a few members of staff go through it first for us, so we can just iron out some of the details, particularly around our administration processes. And then we went live in February. A few weeks ago, when I was looking at the data, we've had 90 members of staff enrolled and 41 completed. It takes staff approximately 90 minutes to complete, and we award a digital badge upon completion. We've also included a survey deployed into the platform just to understand around the impact that the course is having, and we've been making this feedback about 2 weeks beyond the course so we can understand the impact and the change in process. So 90% have agreed that the course has provided advice and guidance that is beneficial to their job role, and 86% have agreed that completing the course has had a positive impact on their practice. And I've included a couple of quotes on the screen. So people have said that this was a really great training session. I'm not very confident with technology, but everything was explained really well so I could understand it. And another quote there, it was a brilliant course. And in particular, the case studies give someone else's view and why it is something is a barrier for them and why, but also the alternatives that we can do to support. So it's having great impact on those that have used it. We've also had good news in that it is becoming a core requirement in the summer for all our academic staff to complete. We have internal ways of judging whether our staff development is either compliance or the one underneath that is core. And actually core feels like a really mature approach for us to have, and that will be going out in the summer, that's aligned. So we'll see a greater uptake from our academic community being encouraged to do that. Can I have the next slide, please? And then finally, we're also currently working on the digital accessibility maturity model. So we're working with AbilityNet and both McNaught Consultancy on the digital accessibility maturity model. And again, this was an output of the Arriving at Thriving report. We were asked to participate, I'm struggling with my words now, by our VC and our interim provost for teaching and learning. And we wanted to benchmark our activity over the past couple of years and to determine our level of maturity. And to get the required support, we've sought the approval of our committees and our key personnel at the university. So I've been out and approached the chair of our student union, our equality, diversity and inclusive lead, and head of student wellbeing, as well as my own senior management team to get that support. We started work back in October, and as the first point of engagement, I joined 2 workshops that were offered by AbilityNet and McNaught Consultancy, and I found these were really enjoyable, insightful, engaging. It was really interesting to explore the model with colleagues from across the sector and just bounce some ideas off and understand where others were at and how that model might help and frame it. We're currently working on the institutional framework as our first priority. The model has 8 lenses through which our practice is evaluated, and these include sort of drivers, responsibilities and policy, culture, skills and expertise. And the questions cover a range of roles like academic delivery of teaching and learning, the support element, library resources and research, as well as leadership roles. Currently, this is a live project, so we've just been out and asked 50 members of staff from across the organisation to take a look at the model and complete it from their own perspective. And we hope to understand that through this process how all these accessibility principles are translated into daily practice. Our next step, and Amy sneakily shared it with me just before the meeting, so while in my prep I've been delving into this, is they're coming on site to play back the findings of the survey so we can discuss our current status, and then we have a planning and prioritisation session. We want to ensure that all our positive practices are identified and embedded and maintained, and the gaps in practice are understood and discussion taken forward on how to move forward. So I've got a bit of a sight on that. So as I was saying, I was really distracted. So we're meeting next week to look at those. As I said, it's hoped that they will highlight areas for enhancement. The recommendations and actions out of that meeting will then be presented at committee for approval and implementation. And hopefully this, well, potentially this could be across several departments. So over the next 6 months, I think there's going to be real opportunity again to enhance the disabled student experience. with a positive impact on the wider student and staff body. So there's a lot to do, and I'm really excited, and some of the conversations that I've been having around this already have been really insightful, just understanding different people's perspectives and how we probably need to join up much more of our communication. Ultimately, by undertaking the model, we hope that as an organisation we understand our level of digital accessibility maturity. As I said, that we continue to build upon our strengths. We understand our risks and areas for enhancements and put those actions in place for improvement, and it's a positive impact on the experience. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, for me, it is a story that's forever to be continued. For me, it definitely feels like it's a story that's unfolded, particularly from a personal experience. It is a story to be continued. It changes with iterative processes, evolving technology, legislation, senior leaders, but ultimately it's going to be embedded in our culture. Also, for me personally, it's been a huge story of personal development, personal growth, and job satisfaction. And I wanted to say, finally end on a big shout out and a big thank you to the community, from whom I have learned so much about the realms of digital accessibility, and from all of you who share so graciously all your wisdom and who I have learned so much from. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that insightful into the work that we've been doing, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Wow, so much really positive work's been going on, and thank you so much for sharing your brilliant work, Claire. So we're just going to move on to the Q&A part of the webinar now. So I'm sure you've got a lot of questions you'd like to ask Claire, Alice and Amy. We've had quite a few through already, so just fire away in the Q&A window if you have anything that you'd like to ask. I doubt we'll manage to cover everything right now, so we'll capture unanswered questions in a follow-up blog on our website in the next couple of days. So just to start off with one of the questions, let's see. In terms of the accessibility course, was that a requirement for staff, or was there any incentive for staff? Asks James.
So I think we've got two. I mentioned a couple there. So there was one that we did earlier in the summer that underpinned our off-campus digital learning baselines, and that was the one I talked about, where we had 95% staff completion. It wasn't mandatory, but it was tracked and it was encouraged. So it was a requirement for teaching in that year. So there was a lot of strong encouragement, top down and ground up, for staff to be engaged and involved in that. Okay.
We've had a question about, where is it here? Sorry, I've just lost it. A question for Alice. You're currently on mute, just to can you provide any guidance on automated testing tools for native mobile apps, and do they exist, and are they as good as the ones for automated website testing?
Yes, I think there is. There's two that I'm familiar with. One for Android is known as it's called Google Accessibility Scanner, and this it can scan the page for you on Android. There's also Accessibility Inspector in iOS, which allows you to inspect the code. So both of those could be worth looking at for automated testing.
Okay, and another question for Claire. Is the Accessibility and Me training for all your staff, or only for those who are responsible for producing digital content?
No, it's for all our staff, because everyone is producing digital content in this. So it's for our professional services. They're often the first people that really do engage. They've taken up the majority of those that have completed it from professional services already. So yeah, it's open to all our staff. And I think I said earlier, it links back to the other question, that is becoming a core requirement for our academic staff to, in particular, the focus on for this summer.
Okay, and another question for you, Claire. How do you gain resource for training, specific posts, ongoing development? Is it project-led, centrally funded or one-off funding?
Say that again, sorry.
How do you gain resource for training or specific posts and ongoing development? Is it project-led? Do you have, is it centrally funded or is it one-off funded project?
It's just, so from our perspective, particularly around sort of the digital learning systems, it's part of our team's remit. So we've incorporated that into our day-to-day running. So it's part of the team here at Derby and the Technology Enhanced Learning team. We have 5 learning technologists and 2 learning technology support officers. So that's become part of our role. Digital accessibility is embedded in there. So it's part of our day-to-day business as usual practice now. It's training that's offered on an ongoing basis. It's part of our resources that we update on a regular basis. Accessibility statements are reviewed on an annual basis. The kickstart for some of that was around some business cases to get the technology in, sort of, so they were using our own university processes where we put the business case together and take them to committee for approval and to get the budget allocated accordingly, and then they become into our annual scheduled maintenance budgets.
Okay, lovely. Kat says, the only app we use is Microsoft Teams. Do we need to link to their accessibility statement, or is it only if we create the app ourselves that we need to do that?
So I would say, as Teams is a third-party platform, you could link to their own accessibility information for it. I've got a URL. I don't know if I can post this in the chat, can I? I will make sure it goes out on the post-webinar blog, and it would be, you'd want to try and top and tail that with the usual sort of how to report an issue if people encounter it, I would have said.
And a sort of related question, where can I find out what is a good accessibility statement and what isn't? How would I know when procuring a new product if their accessibility statement is up to scratch?
Well, there's the model statement on gov.uk, which is it's based on the kind of model statement that came out with the EU directive. So it's good in terms of it's compliant, but I think you can kind of build on that. Again, I'll dig out some links to some webinars. McNaught Consulting have got a model called Facts, which kind of builds on the compliance statement and makes it more student friendly. And, you know, because an accessibility statement is there for 2 purposes: 1, to comply with the regulations, but 2, and probably more importantly, to be a useful tool for students to be able to find out how to make the most of whichever digital platform they're on. And I think the Facts model really helps with that second part. But I keep talking about the blog, but it's going to be a big blog, obviously. I know we'll put lots in there.
Another question for Claire. Did you come up against resistance within the organisation, or thoughts from IT that the task, I guess the accessibility tasks in general, were daunting?
Yeah, we did come up with some resistance. I think one of the classic phrases is, when will this be done? Which still makes me chuckle. But I think just sharing, I think one of the key things that we struggled when we heard about the regulations is, I think, making sure ownership is spread across the university. I think it's those messages that it's everyone's responsibility. Everybody has a level of personal responsibility. It's not a job for IT. You know, I work closely with IT who are helping with securing the third-party accessibility statements, but it's about ultimately ownership for each of the departments and what we can manage. I think where resistance has been met throughout all of these projects, and I mentioned it, it's great to see in the Accessibility and Me course, it's around that lived experience. We've also had a video of one of our own students who spoke for the Inclusive Derby project a few years ago, visually impaired PhD student he is now, but he talks about it from his own personal perspective. And when we show that to members of staff, those who do fight that resistance. I think that's a great message, and it's a great way of putting the importance across to staff. Yeah, and I think it's just, and I think some of our expectations when rolling out a tool like Ally, we were very careful that we weren't expecting it to be 100% overnight and having some real far-reaching goals. It's about what's manageable. It was having a narrative around being future focused, so we weren't asking staff necessarily to go back and retrofit everything. It's about thinking about what are you creating right now and where can you make those improvements, and it's continue on that future focused approach rather than worrying about doing everything at once. It's that little bit at a time and trying to make sense of those workflows where you're using tools like Microsoft that are in front of you to start helping and assist in that direction.
Okay, we've got quite a lot of questions still left to go, so just to remind everyone, we will follow up with the answers on our website later on. But just a quick question, did you also say the course was available to students too?
No, not currently it is, but I've had some of our feedback says that it should be, so that's something we're working on and looking into.
Okay, and then could you talk a little about the experience about comms and training for staff regarding accessibility and the responsiveness or any cultural issues or resistance encountered?
Yeah, comms and training. So we've been doing, I think, comms and, oh God, it's a big area to talk, and I realise we've got little time. So I think it's something we've done steadily over the past 4 or 5 years with campaigns around, and I think some of that is about, you know, we're being brave and reusing some of the content that we've had. So we've had blog posts on breaking it down. What do we mean by digital accessibility? You know, what are captions? Little things like that. You know, we've had those campaigns and we've run those every so often. As part of our guidance on our handbook, that guidance is all written with short videos there that describe some of that. Our training involves, we've run specific workshops on how to use a particular tool. They aren't generally that well attended, so like specific Ally workshops, but where we talk about inclusive practice around a suite of tools where we look at, you know, making a document accessible, quite practical things. Those are the ones that get the real staff engagement where we're doing a whole suite. Occasionally I'm still invited to present into team meetings and then just show them some quick tips and takeaways. So I think it's varying your approach for the audience, and that's sort of the message that we're on at the moment, and it's a package of resources that we're continually reviewing and updating all the time.
Okay, well, just looking at the time, I think we'll have to end the Q&As there. But so just thanks again to Claire, Alice and Amy, and some really useful pointers for everybody to take away. I just have a few final slides to close. Just to let you know, we also run online training sessions on digital accessibility, and you can find out more at abilitynet.org.uk/training, and you can use the AbilityNet webinar 10% off discount code, which is available to all registrants of our webinars. Some of the courses coming up include on the 22nd and the 29th of April are 2 accessibility for developers courses. And then on the 26th of May, how to grow your accessibility maturity for HE and FE professionals. And then the 16th of June, how to deliver and sustain accessible digital learning for HE and FE professionals. And we do have discounted bundles available to bring your team along to that. And then also, as Claire mentioned earlier, we've today launched our brand new e-learning modules for HE and FE. So you can find out more about these at abilitynet.org.uk/e-learning-modules. And if you'd like to discuss them further, please do get in contact. And then we also have some more HE and FE focused services. So we have the McNaughton AbilityNet HE and FE maturity model, a suite of various accessibility services, and also My Study My Way and My Computer My Way. And then you can sign up to our newsletter at abilitynet.org.uk/newsletter. And then finally, don't forget about our next free webinars at /webinars, On the 27th of April, sorry, we have technology help for people with learning disabilities. And then on the 4th of May, for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, we have Accessibility Insights with its co-founders, Jennison Assumption and Joe Devon. And then on the 18th of May, Dementia Friendly Design. So yeah, thank you again, Claire, Amy, Alice, and everyone that's joined us. And we'll be in touch with you soon. So please do fill out the feedback form that will appear at the end of the webinar. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.